in support of the Majority World International Solidarity Coordinating Council of Communities of Resistance, a body for bringing together colonized peoples of around the world to articulate our strength, articulate our power, and articulate our resistance in this part of the world. And to start to get seriously organized so that we can effectively make the sort of changes that we need. We're here at the School of the Oriental and African Studies in the University of London, precisely because it claims to be a school of Oriental and African Studies in the heart of London. At the very same time, an institution that was set up for the training of colonization of peoples around the world, to train an administration who will go around the world to take our lands, manage our properties and tell us that this is private land. We are here to try and to re-vindicate that image, to think about where our communities are, and to start to be serious and articulate what changes that we need. PRALER, meaning the Planet Repairs Action Learning Educational Revolution, means a declaration of a different type of education. An education where we're actually engaged with the real struggles of real ordinary peoples around the world. Because you can talk about decolonization, but you cannot decolonize without people or communities. Now, if you look around, SOAS does precisely that. It removes itself from communities. And it's communities that are fighting and delivering change on a daily basis in the struggle that is making life a livable reality. So we have come here today to share a Glocal Declaration alongside our siblings in Peru, alongside our siblings in Mexico, our family in Ghana, and communities around the world who throughout this week will be demonstrating in practice what liberated education means. And what does liberated education mean? We mean not just sitting in a classroom memorizing notes about how we're going to pass this exam at the end of the year, and when those answers don't turn up in that exam, we're pissed and we feel like we wasted our time. Now, if we feel like we wasted our time, it must mean that we're not actually taking in what we're learning, and we must not think that that information is relevant to us. So what information must be relevant to us? And the challenge must be that we find out that information, we find out the stories that aren't being told, so that what we do in our time here is relevant to the struggles of peoples everywhere. It was once the case that students were the vanguard of every revolution. But we're now sat inside these halls when nukes could be flying tomorrow and we'll still be stuck indoors memorizing for that exam at the end of the year. So what really is our time and what really is education? And what is decolonization without our communities who are trying to articulate and raise their voices about real concrete struggles? We are holding the face of Fahad Shah, an alumnus of the School of Oriental and African Studies. Fahad studied in SOAS and hopefully will be joining us later on the call at 3 p.m. Now, Fahad is currently in prison in Kashmir. Why is he in prison? He is in prison because he is a journalist that was seeking the truth quest of most colonized peoples around the world, which is to tell the truth about the suffering and the violence and extreme militancy with which this system is escalating its violence so that they can have access and total, access to our lands, to our sovereignty, to the resources that keep this system moving. Our job has to be to do something about that when we know that that's the case. When we know that our communities, if we're here, want something from us in return for our time here. Because they do. Our parents raised us, people brought us into this world. So what do we owe our time as people who are part of a global struggle? You may not think you're part of a global struggle, but that struggle is taking place right now. So we'll start with the opening declaration that has been signed by communities of resistance, formations and networks being brought alongside the Extinction Rebellion International Solidarity Network, the Global Majority Versus Campaign, and communities of resistance around the world. And so this reads, the Glocal Declaration of Planet Repairs Action Learning. We write this Glocal Declaration knowing the time that we are in, a time of eco-fascism and a growing threat of global north-provoked nuclear war, faced with global demands of system change and communities compelled into resistance to address the impacts on them of the worldwide climate and ecological crisis. The response of the dominant powers is militarization, to repress and eradicate all forms of resistance. This declaration is an assertion of our shared efforts in defending our indigenous and people's rights, Mother Earth rights, and commitment to building our communities for a world of peace, justice, and planet repairs. An assertion of our people's rights to an education capable of defending the best interests of communities, and especially right now, a just peace. Planet repairs means taking back power for our collective liberation in the ways we think and be, in the relationship with our lands and Mother Earth, and in reclaiming true sovereignty. We are compelled to make serious changes. Throughout the majority world, the colonized peoples of the world and oppressed classes of the world from Asia, Abiyala, Africa, Oceania, and Europe are being increasingly attacked by a system that is against life, organized by an establishment minority. For our communities, this means heightening repression through state-sanctioned, non-state and paramilitary reactionary violence, the persecution, criminalization and surveillance of those defending our Mother Earth, peoples and human rights, attempts to isolate, invisibilize and marginalize struggles in order to destroy them with impunity, a growing rise of miseducation and misinformation, and imposing a universal Occidental truth that erases our knowledges and histories, an increasingly militarized turn to fascism and eco-fascism in the face of the escalating climate and ecological crises, and the ongoing pillaging of our lands, waters and resources globally. We cannot have education that is training desk killers and preparing us for carrying out acts of genocide and ecocide. It should be that we are tested on critical reasoning and providing actual quality services and practical solutions to the problems facing our communities now, today, which calls for the end of the current examination system and other colonial impositions of Eurocentric, white supremacist miseducation. Now, by focusing on educating people to meet the needs of our communities, learning on the job through action learning, there should be a society with full employment for everybody, eradicating unemployment completely. Communities should be represented in all education as indigenous and community co-educators, employing our communities and classrooms to support the effective education of the community. Ashe. The liberation we fight for requires our coming together. It requires turning our institutions, resources and communities over to the service of a world of people's power of the global majority. All peoples must be in power, working together for planet repairs. And so we have some declarations to make about what that means for us today. We declare, first and foremost, the need for all institutions, spaces, and education to be in service to communities of resistance globally and communities and peoples locally. We declare the imperative to be building and strengthening institutions that are capable of defending our people's right to life, sovereignty and self-determination globally, and secure those that are striving to guarantee these rights. We declare the need to be building dialogue, access and solidarity between communities, institutions and resources for equity, for the global recommoning of knowledges, wisdoms, spiritualities and cosmovisions, sharing our knowledges for global power building. And so this declaration means a people's commitment to the emancipation of all peoples in a pluriversal world, Ubuntu Dunia, Aquilombo, un mundo donde quepan muchos mundos. Self-determination and people's sovereignty in education, food, land, housing and work. To determine the political, economic and cultural destiny of our communities, respecting our rights to self-governance in line with our traditions and customs towards a multipolar world of peoples in power. And finally, the freedom from all miseducation, neocolonial violence, malgobiernos, patriarchal violence, discrimination and mass incarceration. In so doing, that means institutions like SOAS must necessarily be accountable to us, be accountable to the needs of communities, be accountable to the needs of its students and communities of resistance and practice who are actively right now building this world, taking back their lands, taking back power and their forms of knowledge, education and sovereignty. And it follows with the undersigned signatories who have signed this letter, including but not limited to the Majority World International Solidarity Coordinating Council of Communities of Resistance, the Global Majority Versus Campaign, the Stop the Maungamizi We Charge Genocide Ecocide Campaign, the Maungamizi Educational Trust, the Extinction Rebellion International Solidarity Network, the Extinction Rebellion being the Change Affinity Network, the Radical Youth Space for Educations, the Glocal African Reparations Forum of London, the Global African People's Parliament, the Pan-African Forum for International Solidarity Coordinating Council, the Global Majority for Planet Repairs Society, Vidya Safari Moksha, the Grassroots Women's International Solidarity Action Network, Abloded Yunyansa in Ghana, Afro ID, Sankofa Kumba Pan-African Community Local Educational Complex, and the Somos Semias Complex of Popular Education. When we come together as peoples that are caring for our planet, that are caring for our families, and that are coming together recognizing that we have one opportunity to come together to stop the violence that is being imposed on us, we can imagine and strive for right now today a different form of education. And in practice, this means that all that time you have working out why this education sucks so bad can be spent in the time with communities who want this education to be about our liberation, who want all of us to not be wasting our time and to free up our time in service of real communities. Throughout the week, we'll be hosting a series of workshops and dialogues with indigenous communities of resistance and communities who are compelled to share their work with the rest of the world so that we build a type of force that is so interconnected that we cannot be stopped. And that is what we're yet to build, which is why we feel like these struggles are isolated, which is why we feel like we can't do anything about an institution which is miseducating us now today. Because we don't know the names of those people and those communities who are in service to all of humanity. This declaration is about putting us back into the service of all of humanity. I'll now pass over to Nita, who will be sharing about the decolonizing SOAS vision.
Okay, greetings family, thank you. So, can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah!
Okay, brilliant. So essentially we've just touched on why SOAS, right? We've talked about the violent colonial history of this place. But also what really is important for us to recognize is that SOAS actually has a decolonizing SOAS vision, which was agreed by the academic board in 2017. And this vision essentially states that SOAS is going to support further recognition and debate about the wide and complex varied impacts of colonialism and imperialism in shaping our university. And I think the part that we are most concerned about is that it talks about having it's made a commitment to forms of public engagement with London, the UK, and the wider world, which support ongoing conversations about the past, present, and future significance of imperialism and colonialism. So us being here today and having this conversation with you about the need for planet repairs, the need to address our miseducation, and the need to challenge SOAS on this decolonizing SOAS vision is so important. And I hope you all really understand what I'm trying to say here. So, this institution talks about decolonization as if it's an academic, intellectual, theoretical exercise, but it's not. And that's why we're going to be hearing from communities of resistance today who are fighting frontline battles that are that's real decolonization, right? That is people who are defending their sovereignty, defending their lands, defending their right to peoplehood, their human rights. And if we're not supporting those struggles, then we cannot call ourselves decolonial, and SOAS cannot call itself a decolonial institution. In fact, it's very much the opposite, because we've come here to express this decolonizing SOAS vision and to help them implement it. And the response has been a crackdown by security. You know, we're already seeing this kind of the militarization that's happening on campus in the highly securitized campus that we're dealing with, which attempts to repress any kind of public engagement with communities, with students, on anything that challenges this institution's dominance. Okay? And so that's why it's so important for us to come together and really understand the type of institution that we are in these walls, and why it is one that is so necessary for us to begin our education for liberation.
Woo!
And just rounding off on what the siblings were talking about, it's really about seeing how it is, you know, that, as he said, you know, it can't be that this decolonization is something that's left in the air. You know, we're here talking about theoretical decolonization like it's not like we have real life liberation fighters right now, freedom fighters right now that we don't know the names of, you know. We don't need to just look into histories. There are people we have to take from our histories, but we have people on the ground in our communities right now that are freeing up their lands, freeing up their waters, actually fighting to form their own forms of communal education, actually fighting to defend their indigenous languages. You know, because to this day, you know, this colonial occidental form of miseducation, it's not one that's only been constrained within these walls, but has actually been exported. You know, when you go to Mexico, you know, you don't have communities, and to Ghana, you know, if people are speaking Nahuatl in Mexico or Chui in Ghana in a school, they're getting hit for doing that, you know, because these forms of education have been made the norm, you know, because our knowledges have been repressed and continue to be suppressed day in, day out. And so it's talking about, instead of this just being, oh, look at these people, like, look, we heard something cool today, you know, we went to a decolonial talk, because that's fuckeries. Like, we're on the time of our people, right? We're on our people's time. And so if we're not acting in line with that, how is it that we're actually able to liberate these departments? You know, if we're studying law, instead of it just being up in the air as a theoretical thing, you know, you could be using your law degree to actually be working alongside communities. You know, communities need lawyers. Communities need processes right now that are saying, you know, they are exercising right now their rights to self-determination. They are exercising their legal rights to sovereignty. They are exercising their legal rights to life. They are exercising their legal rights to family life, you know, to not be discriminated against. These are all rights that we don't have bodies that are defending. We need students to be serious, to be organizing in a way to actually defend justice, to defend peace, and not in the spoken sense. Because there are really practical, concrete circles that could be built around this, you know? Really practically, you know, for example, and that doesn't only need to be in an academic sense. You know, people that do music, for example, thinking about, okay, I'm here, how can I, through my music, be also bringing along my people back home? You know, there are people that right now, back home, there are processes. I know in Ghana, for example, there's a process where people have been basically coming together to do indigenous forms of education through music, right? And it's like, imagine you were connected up with them and actually saying, you know what, this is the education we want in these institutions. You know, we want to be connected up with what you guys are doing. We want to be learning from you, you know. When you tell people and you're very clear in your message and you say, we don't want you to come to the West, we don't want you to see that this is your answer of survival. You know, we want to see how collaboratively we can actually work together to free up our land, you know, to have self-determination in our territories. Because it is not a reality. How many of us here are diaspora? You know, it is not a reality to think that our whole countries, our whole continent can come here. And not even is that not a reality, but that's something we don't want, right? That's genocide, and that's ecocide on our communities, and it's happening right now to this day. So how are we actually saying, you know, not only are we telling you don't come here, but we're actually saying let's actually build the nations. You know, let's build that multipolar world where our communities, where our nations can actually stand side by side. You know, they can exist without stepping on each other, without killing each other. And that's part of this process, you know. For us to be able to move forward, we need to be talking about planet repairs, and to do that, we have to build it, right? So we're gonna be over there. There's actually a place where we want people to go up and actually sign on to the Glocal Declaration. Because as my sibling here was just saying, you know, SOAS is gonna want to crack down on this. Right, we've seen it already. Even though they've said that they're committing to a decolonizing vision, they're already trying to dead it. And so we need to see, like, actually, no, like, our communities globally want us to have a tent that we can sit and actually listen to them, that we can sit and actually learn from their knowledges. And we say that that's something important that we have to defend. Because if we can't even defend a space within an institution that is saying that is for our communities, if we can't even defend a tiny tent where we can say, you know what, we want to have intercultural dialogue, we want to actually be able to listen to our communities, then how are we actually going to win this war, you know? So that's just the first step of what we need to defend, and so we want people to sign up to that, and I'm going to pass over to Tanita.
Yeah!
Okay, thank you, family. So yes, again, if you haven't already, please sign up. Sign up to the Glocal Declaration and sign up to engage in this learning throughout the week. We've also got the timetable and more flyers over there. So next up, I'd like to invite Belrera Adi, Labour MP, to talk a bit, to share with us talk about why we're here, talk about why it's so important for us to be creating spaces that is educational spaces for our liberation. Yeah, and thank you very much for coming.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm very pleased to be showing support today, and pleased to be able to speak to all of you. It's so important that we understand just how much our education influences us, and you'll hear it said all the time, but the extent to which it affects every single aspect of our lives and how we move forward, and how we, younger people, the future of this country and other countries go on to be, can't be underestimated. No one is actually born racist. It's something that they learn. And we see children exhibiting racism and misogyny as young as in nursery school. So that's something that they pick up, that's something that they learn. So unless we're going to change the way in which we teach people, unless we're going to decolonize our education systems, and using that phrase is so key, we're not going to see any change in the way in which our world is run in terms of discrimination. You can't say that you want to end discrimination and not look fundamentally at the education that people are receiving. It makes no difference at all. And the thing is, there is actually a want for that change. There's a want for that change. A few years ago, when the Black Lives Matter protests started back up again following the death of George Floyd, we found that over 5 different parliamentary petitions, the desire for Black history to be taught in our schools became the subject which had the most signatures of any parliamentary petitions across the country. Now, you know that there were so many. There have been wars, there have been all these different things that people, thousands and hundreds of thousands of people have signed up to. But Black history being taught in our schools, and proper histories being taught in our schools as a form of decolonising our education, was one of those that were deemed the most important. And I think it's really, really worrying that isn't acknowledged in any way at all. And I really do worry when it comes to Black History Month, for example. There are very kind of cynical, piecemeal approaches made to addressing the issue, instead of doing it in the way that we actually do need to, breaking down some of the structures and some of the institutions and some of what has been put forward in terms of our education. And that's an unwillingness to change. And that is why this is being called here, for you to see a change in that. Now, as part of my work in Parliament, I chair the all-party parliamentary group on African reparations. For some people, that has been seen as quite controversial. The idea that we would have such a group exist. In fact, we couldn't even get a single Tory MP to agree to us, only one to join, to actually allow us to form the group in the first place, because he agreed that we should at least be able to have the debate. Now, I understand there are so many different challenges that we face in this country and right across the world, but reparations is so key to that. How are we going to teach people that what has been done in the past was wrong, if we don't teach them that in some ways you have to recompense for that past? If you do not recompense for that past, then you don't see it as wrong. I see it as you only apologise to those people who are your equals. And if we do not apologise, if we do not make amends, we are saying that these people are not equal. So we're continuing that discrimination that has coloured our history for so long. And so I see reparations as a very, very key and important part of decolonisation. Now, in terms of thinking of what's happened, or what people have become aware of in terms of climate breakdown over the past few years, I think to myself, in the global south, for years and years and years, whilst we in the West have in some ways become more wise to it, become more active in terms of protest, in terms of being involved, people in the global south have been experiencing climate breakdown for decades. I think about tsunamis, I think about all of those floods, I think about those islands sinking into the sea, the droughts, all of those things that we've seen for so long. And unfortunately, some of these movements have become quite white, put it quite plainly, and even though we know that people of colour right across the world have a huge investiture in what's going to happen in terms of these campaigns. So it's so important that we broaden out those campaigns and actually look at them for a focus of anti-racism as well. It's so key to look at them with a focus of anti-racism, because I think about some of the things that have been done by Western countries, including this one, where we've gone to other countries, we deliberately underdeveloped them, stolen resources, things such as mining and deforestation, all those things that have contributed to the climate crisis that have been done to these communities. So when we look at these reparations, we're looking at what I would like to call environmental reparations. I think that's really, really important as well. And I think we need to look at debt cancellation as well. A lot of countries are now paying so much money to repay all of these debts. Some that have been paid over and over again. They're literally paying interest now. And instead of being able to use that money for themselves to build the infrastructure of their own countries, they're having to keep paying back more and more money from countries that have stolen so much from them. So thank you so much for listening today. Please all go and sign up to the declaration and understand that unless we account for what we've done in the past, unless we accept blame, unless we accept fault, unless we move forward from a place of equality, nothing, absolutely nothing is going to change. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm also going to just quickly, so yeah, we talked about reparations, and reparations is widely misunderstood, right? But it's about repairing and remaking ourselves, our peoples, as we repair and remake the world. And that's why we need planet repairs. And planet repairs is a concept that comes from the International Social Movement for African Reparations. And it talks about cognitive justice, environmental justice, and reparatory justice. Cognitive justice being exactly what we're trying to do here. Recognize the pro-versality of our knowledges, raise up all our indigenous knowledges, because there's not just one truth, as we said in the declaration. There are many truths, there are many different knowledges, wisdoms, cultures, and understandings of the world that we should recognize and consider as equal. There should not be one that is prioritized above the other, and definitely not one that is used to justify genocide and ecocide across the world for centuries, right? Environmental justice is obviously about stopping the harm, so stopping this climate breakdown and reconnecting with the earth and going back to our ways of being when we were in harmony with our lands, which many of our indigenous communities, ancestral ways of being already were. This whole extractive model of our economy, of the way we're here, you know, all the waste we produce, everything, all of this way it's set up, and we're set up in a way that we're so complicit in it, we don't even have the power to really live otherwise. That is a question of environmental justice. And the reparatory justice, first and foremost, is about stopping the harm. So stopping all of this harm, and it's about land back and defending our sovereignty and our peoplehood. So that's planet repairs, and that's why we're here for the Planet Repairs Action Learning Education Revolution. And so now we're going to restate our final demands on the Glocal Declaration.
Woo! More wooing.
So the first thing we'd like to do is to greet our family who have joined us, who are tuned into this process and who are taking back spaces in their so-called spaces of higher education and are returning that to the service of their communities. Because when we talk about reparatory justice, we mean an education system that is about us, is about our liberation, is about real power. And so we greet our communities, including the students in Edinburgh, young people in Mexico, young people in Peru, and young people in Ghana who are embarking on this question because we aren't doing this on our own and we can't do this on our own. But when we look to the concrete examples of how we're going to achieve that justice, we can start learning exactly from the real on-the-ground struggles. And that's our responsibility as people here who live in an invisible bubble that is telling us that there aren't alternative ways of doing this thing. Because there aren't only alternative ways, there are people who are winning real struggles that are freeing us all up, and we don't even know that those changes are really about us. And that's what we have to stop. And when we can challenge that, then we can challenge what this society claims to be when it extends its power globally. And when we become a global peoples that are connected in our communities, in our students, between our students, then we can start to affect that change. Demand number one is that this space has been reclaimed as a space that belongs and is representative of what our communities need us to know. Throughout the week, we'll be holding a series of workshops, screenings, learnings, live streamed internationally, which are our way to actually start to build this dialogue, so that it should be that our lawyers and students who are here are working directly in tandem with communities elsewhere. But we first have to commit ourselves to learn about what that really means and what those struggles are. This space, therefore, is now known as the Walter Rodney Freedom Square. Now I'm going to say that again so it registers on people's ears. This space is now the Walter Rodney Freedom Square. One of the alumnus of this university who studied here, who dedicated their life struggle to their communities, and should be the type of examples that we hold up as the ancestors that we want to be like. And that goes for all of us to go into our own histories and to find out who really are we trying to be? What are we trying to take back and reclaim so that we can claim that back for ourselves? And that is a responsibility of all peoples of this world, so that we can have this interconnected society where we really dialogue and celebrate each other's wins, celebrate each other's heroes and sheroes, celebrate the people that have made us still alive here today.
Yeah, so thank you everybody. Make sure to come through to the activities this week. At 3 p.m. we're going to have a call in with some of the alumni talking. SOAS alumni that is going to be participating. Then at 5 p.m. We're going to have communities that are right now doing these real forms of liberating education, sharing examples. Some of them are in Mexico. We might have participation from people, I think, in Ghana and in Colombia, but that has to be confirmed still just because of internet connection issues. Now, tomorrow as well, there's going to be loads of activities. We make sure people, there's the little leaflet so that you can make sure that you come through to the activities. It's really important for people to actually spread the message, because this is the thing, like, our people are really on the line, you know, like they are really on the line doing this stuff. And so for them to actually, even like, just on a real one, like, people really need to take this seriously. Like, some communities, for them to come and actually share their knowledges, right, they need to go get internet connection, which means putting their lives at risk, because right now paramilitary groups are after them, the whole government's after them, you know, because they're actually liberating their territories. And that's why they're making those sacrifices to come and talk to people in these institutions, because they're saying, we need you guys to organize yourselves to actually back what we're doing, right? So if they're taking those risks, we really need to see what side of the line we're on, you know, because there's really only two sides. And so make sure people come through to this. Make sure people come down, invite all your people. On Saturday as well is going to be a day for communities. You know, these spaces, they've been telling us that they've got bare empty rooms in there. And how many people in our communities don't even have Saturday schools or even youth centers anymore because they've closed them all down, you know? Like, we don't have spaces. These spaces should be in the hands of our communities. There's free space. That's what liberating education actually looks like. Our aunties, our uncles could be coming down here teaching Ewe, for example, teaching Quechua. It's true, like, we've got these educators in our communities, but we don't even see them as educators. We just say, hey mom, hey dad, you know? But they're filled with knowledge. You speak to even the security guards here. There's one brother here, he's telling me he's from Fiji. He's got a PhD and he's here as a security guard. But he's cold. This guy's telling me all about the colonial history of Fiji. Got another brother here, he's from Algeria, telling us all about the need to unite in the revolution. Family, our people are organized. It's just about coming together and actually building that power, and actually we're doing it in a concrete way. So that's us, sign up, and we're about, so chat to us.